Dick Smith Electronics, another look through old catalogues, this time kits. The heyday of kits in Australia was the 70s and 80s, and Dick Smith Electronics was a big part of that. We'll go through some catalogues from 1981 to 2001 and have a look at the kits on offer. But first, we'll look at what you could get in the 60s. From Electronics Australia, July 1966. Back then, it was either beginners kits or stereo equipment. Here's an ad from RCS Radio, which continued until fairly recently in the printed circuit board business. And they still got apostrophes wrong back then. Now onto the main topic of Dick Smith kits. Pride of place were the Funway series. Funway 1 didn't require soldering. Funway 2 did. Funway 1 had kits 1 to 10 in one pack and 11 to 20 in the other. However, if you wanted to build several at once, you'd need to buy extra bits. No doubt good commercial sense for Dick Smith. Funway 2 had the book, plus you bought each kit individually, and it came with its own printed circuit board. These were short form kits, so if you wanted boxes, potentiometers, knobs and other accessories, then it was another trip back to the shop. Project Electronics was a thin red book published by Electronics Today. It had very simple circuits aimed at the beginner. Around this time, when component stereo was popular, audio kits were a big thing, especially for the more advanced constructors. You could actually save money compared with buying an off-the-shelf product. And the component form of stereos meant there were all different kits for speaker systems, amplifiers and tuners. Also graphic equalizers and mixers. Tape decks and turntables were generally left to be bought commercially, but they could easily be plugged in to a kit amplifier. The most popular was Playmaster, published in Electronics Australia magazine. From Electronics Today magazine was this massive 300 watt amplifier. Now the price is low, but note that you'll require the power supply parts to complete it. Test gear kits were also popular. This was another area, like home stereo, where the kit was often cheaper. Now, the first computer kits were described in the mid-70s. Here's a somewhat more advanced version, but you'd still have to be fairly confident of your construction abilities given the price. This is the Little Dick cartoon character that was used for a few years after Dick Smith himself sold the business. Kits took pride of place appearing in the front of the catalogue. The Funway kits once again appear, but they're described in a bit more detail. Let's have a look at the Funway 1 kits. These were kits for their time, and if it was done again these days, the choice of projects would be somewhat different. For instance, the CB radio receiver would have been fine if you had a CBer in the street, but without much 27 meg AM activity, it wouldn't hear anything today. For a short time, Dick Smith had Blocktronic. This was simpler than Funway 1 or Funway 2. You could just slot modules together to make various projects. A big omission in Dick Smith's range is they never sold kits with springs. That's the type with a large cardboard panel with components mounted, and you would put wires between the springs to make a large number of projects. Some of those kits, which were sold by Tandy, had up to 200 projects, though there are also smaller versions available as well. They're actually still available today through Altronics. Here's some kits of some interesting technologies of the 80s. Of those, two are extinct: teletext and AM stereo. But stereo TV is still going strong, but today doesn't require a special kit to decode. In the mid-80s, amateur radio kits were big. On the left is a 70cm FM transceiver, known as the Explorer. It was the first kit for 70cm and got many amateurs onto the band. And on the right is the 2-meter version, known as the Commander. Radio teletype used to require a bulky and heavy teleprinter machine. That's now replaced with a small computer with this little kit that plugged into it. The VZ200 and VZ300 computers were known to draw very little current and be particularly RF quiet. Kits for HFSSB amateur transceivers were rare back then, although they're much common now. Here's an offering, a single band but a digital display, quite possibly useful for portable or mobile operating. Then there is the radio direction finder, particularly popular with the fox hunt crew. Into the 90s, and the Funway series was still going strong. Not only that, but Funways 1 and 2 had been joined by Funway 3. The 1990s brought more kits for electronic music, or that had musical effects. ICs doing those jobs were becoming more widespread and cheaper. Everyone's mobile these days has a speakerphone, but back then most phones didn't, and so there is a kit for it. In the audio area, there are more short form kits that you could put in your own box. Before the internet or eBay, you would have had to fill one of these to order by mail. More dead technology. There are kits for a portable AM stereo radio and for your component system, a stereo AM tuner. And teletext still survives, though I don't think it took off amongst the general public. A new 2-metre rig had come out, offering easier tuning and a more professional look. Its sound quality on transmit was also better. And here's some other accessories: shortwave antenna, 2-metre and 70cm converter. These converters were for this 6-metre FM receiver you see here. It was quite expensive, all up, especially if you just wanted to receive 2 metres. An ambitious but worthy project, and I don't think many were sold. In contrast, the VHF FM monitor receiver here was quite popular and good value. It had a free-running oscillator, but was surprisingly stable on 2 metres. I built one of these myself for a 2-metre portable FM transceiver. The long board you see here is a 1-watt FM transmitter for 2 metres. Again, crystal controlled, so to get it on multiple frequencies would have been quite expensive. It was unusual in that it required 30 volts to run, and that required shelling out for another kit you see here. This would have been quite high-tech back then, an alarm phone dialer, so if anyone broke in at home, it could ring you at work. There are logic probes for the increasing number of digital projects, and more kits were using LED 7-segment displays, or even LCD. In '95, Funray was still going, Volume 1, 2 and 3. Some people didn't like how with the Funray kits you had to buy the book, even if you only wanted to build one kit. The Discovery series were kits that had their own instructions. They were generally short form, with the circuit board, components and instructions, but you had to find the box yourself. Switch mode supplies were used in computers, but for other electronic applications, the old heavy transformer still reigned supreme, especially if you had to power sensitive audio or radio gear. Commercially made power supplies were fairly expensive, so this was an area where the home constructor, or even the kit constructor, could save some money. You could also build your own multimeter, which would have been an ideal beginner's project and given them a useful piece of test equipment. The meter featured was also available as a commercial product for a few dollars more. By the mid-1990s, trends in consumer electronics had changed. Large screen TVs and computers were competing for the consumer dollar, and we were less concerned about hi-fi audio. Consumer audio got smaller and became personal, and component stereos were becoming like the radiograms of the 60s. Kits followed. There are still audio kits, though more of them were supplied short form, leaving you to find the box. The era of the Playmaster amplifier, graphic equalizer, speakers and other accessories had come to a close, and the magazine that produced them, Electronics Australia, disappeared a few years later. Amateur radio kits were also less prevalent than in the early 90s. The only one left was an 80-metre AM CW transmitter, which, with 100 milliwatts output on one crystal-controlled frequency, was unlikely to get many contacts at all. At about the same time, JCAR had a double sideband kit with around 1 or 2 watts output. That would have been a lot more successful. By 2000, programmable electronics had arrived, and was starting to be stocked by kit suppliers. Dick Smith had both the hot chip and the basic stamp. Programmable electronics had also come to toys, for young and not so young kids. An example is the Lego Mindstorms. There are also some simple one-experiment general science kits. Outside of microcontrollers, there is an increased emphasis on simpler kits. From a few lines in the 1981 catalogue, Funway 1 had spread out to 2 pages. The same for Funway 2. To date, most kits had been packaged by Dick Smith's own kit department. However, there is also stocking of the Velleman kits from Europe, with a large number of board-only short-form kits. Their instructions were fairly basic, but I found the ones I built worked well. PICs were also starting to come in this case as a pre-programmed chip. You still had the chance to build your own multimeter, but this time the kit was updated to be a digital unit, at a price cheaper than the previous analog multimeter kit. Dick Smith's range of FM transmitters was never that great, typically the kit in the Funway and 1 or 2 others. The biggest range was stocked by Talking Electronics, whose books often appeared in Dick Smith stores. Overall, the 2000 catalogue had more kits than previous catalogues. However, most of the kits were smaller and could be built in a weekend. More kits were being imported, and there is a greater use of microcontrollers and other programmable technology. A couple of years later, the kit range had started to shrink, and the larger powerhouse stores got rid of kits entirely. A bit later on, the smaller stores followed, and the company became purely a consumer electronics outlet. Electronic kits continue to be available from Altronics and JCAR. In addition, ham radio kits are available from suppliers overseas, and even some in Australia. Often these are fairly small firms, maybe 1 or 2 people as a sideline. There's still a good range of kits, but you just need to look harder. You won't find them at your local Dick Smith anymore.